Hello all again, it's Garron. I'm here to teach one of my last courses in the course of this program, which is about listening and caring. This section is incredibly important for any chaplain or anyone who's studying the chaplaincy program. This is a make it or break it, right? Prayers matter. Every part of this course matters, but I would argue that the part of listening and caring on the behalf of the chaplain is one of the highest important parts that you can study and look at. Now, there's a whole chapter, and on being a Masonic chaplain, on chapter 5, listening and caring, right? What I recommend, of course, is that you have read that chapter, and after you've read that chapter, read it again. It is very important material. I have served in chaplaincy roles, especially in a hospital. A lot of what is covered in this chapter is what was covered when I started chaplaincy and what was extremely important for my ability to succeed and do well in chaplaincy. So I know there's a lot in this program. I know there's a lot that you're learning and reading, but chapter 5, if you've read it, read it again at some point. Read it again, especially if you are going to be installed as a chaplain soon. Definitely give this chapter another read because it is extremely important. So, with that being said, let's get started on what listening and caring means for a chaplain. So, one of the biggest pieces of advice, or one of the biggest parts that is mentioned in this chapter that I think needs to be really hit home, that you need to remember, is that we are listening to understand, not to respond. In any given situation that you are called to, or a brother that you're talking to, when you're talking to them, or more so listening to them, you don't need to always respond. You don't always have to feel like you have to say something. That's something I personally struggled for a while, right? Of this idea that I have to have a response. Any sense of silence is bad. Silence is bad. That is not true. Let silence be. If there are pauses in the conversation, if there are moments and minutes of silence, that is okay. I've had situations where I've stood in a room for 15 to 20 minutes with people, and it was utter silence, and it was beautiful. The silence spoke a lot of emotion in the room, and by the end of it, I still prayed with them. So silence is okay. You are there to listen. Listen to the needs that people have. Listen to the needs of your brethren. That's what matters. So just listen to understand. Try to really get the situation, because you might be thrown a lot of details, a lot of a long story or a long situation. So just listen. And when it is time to speak, make sure you're asking the important clarifying questions that you need to be able to help this brother. Maybe they need actual assistance. Maybe they're just venting. Or maybe by the end of it, they just need a prayer. These are things you'll learn as you're listening to the conversation. So listening to understand, not to respond, is one of the biggest pieces of advice that I can give you. So other than that, it's not about you. So make sure that as you're talking to them, as you're listening, you don't try to always relate. It is a habit for chaplains, it is a habit for people that we try to relate to what people are saying, right? Someone might be going through an issue, a situation, let's say, one example that's mentioned in the book is, my mother died. Oh, well, my mom died too, blah, blah, blah. That is a pretty serious example, but that is definitely an example that you don't want to use, right? Where you don't want to try to relate to that, because right now what that person is going through is a lot of pain, a lot of sorrow, a lot of questioning, not believing what happened just really did happen, and the like. The last thing they need is to have someone else say, oh yeah, I had that happen to me too, because then it kind of makes that brother feel like, well, what happened to me happens to everyone, so I guess it doesn't really matter, or I should get over it, or whatever. There are a lot of the times where you don't want to try to relate to the other person with a story. Now, with that being said, there are certain situations in chaplaincy where it's okay to share a story with the person if you think it's actually going to help and get through. I've had situations, for example, where it feels like the person I'm talking to isn't really wanting to open up. Maybe it's that they don't trust me. Maybe they don't think I understand, right? The situations where you have someone who thinks like, oh, you possibly couldn't understand, right? Those are the situations where it might be okay to share a story and it might not be. Sometimes it's okay to lead with, yeah, you're right. I really don't understand and I don't think I will truly fully understand how you're feeling, but I'd like to understand and I'd like you to tell me more. That's one of the easiest ways to go about that. Another way is, yeah, I don't really fully understand how you're feeling, but I had a similar situation to that, and I know how that made me feel, and it was very upsetting. It was very frustrating. You know, is that how you feel too, or is it different? These are questions you ask, right? And that's another thing with this is the questions you ask, make them open-ended questions. Not always yes, no, yes, no. And if you do get yes, no, ask them to elaborate. It's okay to ask to elaborate. They might not be willing to elaborate. They might not be willing to tell you any more than they did. If that's the case, don't push and prod. Go forward with the next question. Now, of course, another important thing to mention that I should have mentioned a little earlier in this is your body language. Body language is extremely, extremely important while you're being a chaplain. Whether you're standing or sitting or at the bedside of someone, it matters. Body language speaks more than what maybe you might, right? So what I mean by body language is you want to make sure you're actually facing the person and looking at them, giving your undivided attention directly to them. That is step number one. You don't want to be looking around, looking at the ceiling and the tiles, looking at the floor, or something on the lines of that, because then it shows that you're just not interested, or you seem like you're not interested. So make sure you're giving eye contact and looking at them while they're speaking. They might not look at you, they might be looking around as they speak. And that's okay. That is what it is. You're not here to judge how they are acting with their body language, so to speak. You are supposed to be there to listen and show that you are listening. So, eyes forward, head forward, looking at them. Another thing is your posture as a body, right? So you can cross your legs, that's okay. If you're like me, you're very tall and it's sometimes uncomfortable just to have your legs sit, still. So sometimes crossing them is a little more comfortable. But what you don't want is to have them crossed, and you're rocking your legs and moving your legs and dangling them. Or, what I do is the little nervous shaking of my leg where my leg is up and down, up and down, up and down. Because then that shows that maybe you're nervous or maybe that you're really anxious to get out of there. That's what it preaches. It might not what you mean to do. For me, it's more of a nervous thing. That's just how my body is sometimes, and that's how I get some of its energy out. But to someone watching you, it looks like you're impatient or trying to get out of the room, and that's not what you want. So sit still is what I'm trying to say. For your hands, it's always good to just kind of have them in your lap or off to the side. Don't try to, cross and stuff like that if you can avoid it, because sometimes it seems like you're closed off, right? That you don't want to speak. If you stay open, right, like this, then it seems like you're ready to have a conversation and be open with that person. I know these things that you're probably thinking like, yeah, right, that doesn't actually matter, but it definitely, definitely does. Body language matters when you're talking to someone. You want to appear open and paying attention, and hopefully you are actually being open and paying attention, or the other person might not be willing to do the same for you. So that's one of the most important things you can do is about your body language. Another thing is to avoid trying to fill that silence, like I said earlier. And I'm going to be a little more specific in this case, right? So don't be going, yeah, right, those little things that we do when we're listening sometimes to a person. Because one, there's a good chance if you're doing that, you're probably not actually listening. I've done that before to pretend that it seems like I'm listening when I'm not in reality. So avoid that at all costs. Also, if you're going, right, yeah, you could be agreeing to something that you probably shouldn't be agreeing to, and the book mentions that. So avoid that. Again, it's okay to be silent and just listen. Just sit there. Maybe you can nod your head a little bit. It doesn't hurt to nod a little bit. Okay. Stuff like that. It's okay, but not if it's constant. And make sure you are actually listening to what they're saying. The best thing you can do is, as you're listening to the person, listen to the story. Try to pick out the details that matter. Okay, this person seems like they're on the verge of crying. Why are they crying? Okay, I'm listening to their story. Oh, okay, well, they're talking about their day. Okay, some of those details don't matter. Their breakfast doesn't necessarily matter. Oh, their car started having issues this morning. Then they got into work late, and then they got reprimanded. Oh, okay, I'm seeing now. Oh, and then they got a call about a sick family member. These are the bits of detail that you will pick up and realize why some emotions are coming out of a person versus others. So listen to every bit, because it will also help you formulate what questions you may ask, whether it be clarifying questions or what have you. Before you try to offer any type of words of advice or words of comfort, the best thing you can do is to ask for words of clarification if there are things that you don't understand. Make sure you're asking those questions. With that being said, as you're trying to formulate and think of what you want to say next as you're listening, it is important to use or be careful of the use of words that you're using. So one thing that I was taught that I think is very important as you're listening and asking questions is using I wonder statements. I wonder if the reason that you're upset with your boss is because of, right? I wonder if you got mad at your neighbor because you've been having issues sleeping at night, or I wonder, something like that. I wonder statements, because it phrases a nice question and makes the other person think, yeah, maybe that is the case. Maybe I am, angry at my neighbor because of, I'm dealing with stuff on my own and it's not anything my neighbor's actually doing, right? Stuff like that. I wonder, or I feel. And I wonder statements are very easy to use, very easy to put forward, and have an open-endedness to them. I wonder has an open-endedness. It's not a direct yes or no question, this option or that option, or these three options. It's very open. So practicing I wonder this, ... I wonder if you're upset because of ... I wonder if what happened this morning, is still affecting you now, and that can maybe lead into more details and more explanation. Now, I'm not saying that you should use I wonder every question, but it might be important to use at certain points when you're trying to ask for clarification. So that's another important part to remember. Another thing that I think will be very easy to recall if some of what I'm saying, if you're trying to jot it down or remember what else is important, is on pages 124 and 125. There are lists of the always and the never, and we've talked quite a bit about this. So I'm just checking, making sure if there's anything else that we could also ask. Yeah, another thing is what I mentioned of body language. The body language of the other person matters. That might help formulate your questions. If they're getting very excited or very angry or they're close to tears, that can help you understand what's going through their mind, or maybe something to ask, like, I noticed that, as you were talking about your daughter, that you were getting really, teary-eyed and choked up. May I ask why that is? That stuff matters. Watching their body language, not just the words that are coming out of their mouth, also matters to how you are going to answer questions or what help that you can give. Because people are expressive. You've seen me in my conversations where I'm moving my hands and the like. People have expressions. They also use their body language. Pay attention to that body language and what it might mean, and to ask what it might mean to the person. So, yeah, try to not use a lot of pausing and ums. That doesn't mean not to take your time with questions. You can formulate your questions that you want to ask. Again, get comfortable in that silence, but make sure you know what you're asking and put it forward. Yeah, MC is not one you want to use either. And also, you're not there to diagnose the problem. You're not there to fix everything, right? A lot of the time in chaplaincy, what you will be doing is just listening, like we talked about at the very beginning of this. You're just listening to what's going on in life, because there's a good chance they haven't had someone to actually listen to how they're feeling. They don't want someone to necessarily diagnose. If they wanted someone to diagnose their problem or fix all their problems, they would probably go to a therapist or a counselor or a doctor, right? You are there to listen and potentially offer emotional support and spiritual help, right? That is what you're there for. Don't think you need to fix all their problems by the end of the conversation. But if you can help them relieve whatever burden is going on within, or help them express that, that might help them know what they need to do next to get better. Or maybe simply talking to them and praying with them is exactly what they needed. Some people just need someone to talk to. Believe it or not, that's all it can take. Just keep that in mind. So another part of this book that's really important that I want to talk about is forgiveness and reconciliation. I have seen often too much in the fraternity of brethren that stay angry at each other and aren't willing to forgive, and it's just crazy to me, right? Because of all things, of the world, of our community, we would think that we would remember that we are brethren, that we are Masons. At the end of the day, you are my brother, right? No matter what quarrel I might have, no matter what frustration I have, you are my brother. And that's what matters. And I love and care for you, and you're part of my community. You're part of the fraternity, right? But sometimes that's hard. We're human. It's hard to forgive. It's hard to forget. It's hard to reconcile. But it is an important task. That's why I say read this chapter more than once, because starting on page 126, you have the chapter about forgiveness and reconciliation. Now, a brother might be just coming up to you to talk about something that they're wanting to ask about. You're not here to absolve sins or absolve someone of something that they're trying to reconcile. But there is a good chance as chaplain you're going to be asked to be the neutral party, because you're going to serve as the neutral party. You don't want to be taking sides in a conflict. Do not take sides. Absolutely do not take sides. Even if you think one person is right versus the other, it doesn't matter. Do not take sides. You are there to be the neutral party, the moderator of the situation of two brethren. So it's good to let the two brothers talk about why they're angry, what made them frustrated with one another, what made them upset with one another. Maybe it might be a simple misunderstanding, and talking about that and letting that out will help. And again, using that I feel statements rather than saying, well, you purposely try to get that chair from me so that you could undermine me. That might not really be the case. Just say, I feel, using a lot of I feel statements, and saying that right off the bat for the brethren might help quite a bit, right? So I feel that you did this, blah, blah, blah. That's how you personally feel. It's not a matter of fact, right? So I feel statements matter. Let the brethren say their piece, say what's upsetting them, and then try to see in the midst of that, as if you as a chaplain can see where maybe they can move forward and forgive one another, and then hold on to that forgiveness if you can reach that forgiveness. Not every situation you come across, you're going to be able to reach forgiveness, and that is what it is. But hopefully you as the chaplain can continue to work with them to reach that forgiveness, because the last thing you want is that friction within the fraternity, right? You want to help the brethren see what the issue is and see a path forward. How can I, forgive you and you forgive me, and how can we move forward? Doesn't mean we have to be friends and buddies, but if we can work together, if we can get along with one another and set aside whatever difference is, or maybe find an area or space for our differences, then that's what will matter, right? And then afterwards, after reconciling and use reconciliation between two brethren, hold on to that forgiveness. If they use the words, I forgive you, or yeah, we're okay, or they have a handshake, hold on to that. Remind the brethren to hold on to that forgiveness, right? Because it's very easy to fall down that hill or fall back down into that slope of being angry again, like, oh, I remember when, he did this and blah, blah, blah. Now he's doing this. Well, that past situation, you forgave him for. Why are you still upset and angry? This is a new situation, but you know how to move forward, hopefully, if you've had that conversation and forgive him for this new situation. Right? So hold on to that forgiveness. It's very hard to, but it's important. So I will stop there. I highly recommend you as a chaplain to continue to look more into reconciliation. There are a lot of great books that you can look into. There's a great book. It's more about criminal justice. So there are some of it that you're definitely not going to use, but Howard Zer's Changing Lenses is about the criminal justice system and restorative justice, right? Of restoring the relationship between two people and finding a path forward. But restorative justice is similar to reconciliation, which reconciliation is part of restorative justice, is something that you can potentially use. So definitely look more into that. And it wouldn't hurt to have a lesson as a chaplain, if you have some space for lodge education, is to talk about the principles of reconciliation and forgiveness, because it's not something that you can just use in a lodge. It's something that we need to be using in our communities, in our families, in society as a whole. It's all very important. So like I said, I hope a lot of this was easy to understand and something that you can remember. And of course, read that chapter again and again and again. I've said that a million times in this little lesson so far, but yes, read that chapter again. Take it all in, because listening and caring matters so much as a chaplain. And I hope you see that too. Thank you for listening to me and being part of this lesson. I hope you took something away from it and can use it for your future as a chaplain. Thank you.